our community in Berlin was like very Solana heavy, and we did a bunch of really cool partnerships early on, Solflare and a bunch of others. And it kind of spiraled from there in a very positive way. And then Chris got in touch with Tamar, and the very first summer camp 2022 happened. And we started doing more events with Foundation, and then a super team was born late 2022, and now we're having our 2-year anniversary. And there's a reason to continue getting engaged, right? Like, what's the point of showing up to a town hall if there's no value, right? So it's also part of our work to make sure that, there is reason and there's meaningful connections, and that people actually have interest in contributing and giving and being part of it and growing something.
GM, welcome to another episode of the Solfate podcast. We're talking with builders and founders in the Solana ecosystem. And this episode, we had both a builder and a founder, and not a developer, but a phenomenal person, and probably my current favorite person in the Solana ecosystem. Bekka from Superteam Germany.
You stole it from me. I was about to say that. Bekka was awesome. She's one of the co-founders of Superteam Germany. We had a blast chatting with her. I think probably the big themes from the episode is general community building, and probably the importance of non-technical builders in the ecosystem. It's easy in blockchain to think that technical prowess is what wins. But in reality, there's so much that goes into building products, creating community, that is the non-technical side of things. Hopefully we have some of you in our audience, despite the fact that, we tend to lean technical on this show. But none of us would be here without the other functions involved. True
statement.
Before we dig into the episode, just a quick shout out to Phantom. We love partnering with Phantom. They're the wallet of the Solfate ecosystem. I also will forever plug Unbox, my dev shop. If you need any development work done, whether it be on-chain or off-chain, please let us know. But with that, let's get into the show.
Let's go.
Nothing in this podcast is or should be considered financial advice. Any opinions and thoughts expressed are solely those of the individual. They do not represent the opinions of any entity. Enjoy.
Okay, so before Superteam Germany, there was a Solana community, and that's part of the reason that Germany was actually chosen to be one of the first Superteam countries. My co-founder, Chris, some of you know and love him for his quirkiness. He, in 2021, him and I and a few others, we co-founded what was called the NFT Club Berlin. Of course, it was like the big NFT craze, and there was a lot sort of new interest in Web3, and there was no in-person communities that were happening, at least in our region. And so we kind of created this community and started to do a lot of in-person events. Chris very quickly, end of 2021, got like really into Solana. And at that time, there was a lot of Solana fun. I mean, as there always kind of was. But he's a very enthusiastic person, and it made us all also very enthusiastic. And I was too poor to mint anything on ETH anyways. So as a creator and artist, and I was like, oh, I can't, even transact on ETH. And it was also proof of work back then. And I was not, I'm a bit of a tree hugging hippie too. So, we got really into Solana, and Form Function had also launched early 2022. And so a whole bunch of the local creators and,
pour one out for your fallen homies.
I know. And so, we started our community in Berlin was like very Solana heavy, and we did a bunch of really cool partnerships early on, Solflare and a bunch of others. And it kind of spiraled from there in a very positive way. And then Chris got in touch with Tamar, and the very first summer camp 2022 happened. And we started doing more events with Foundation, and then a super team was born late 2022. And now we're having our 2-year anniversary in mid-November. So time flies.
Yeah. That is awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Coming up on 2 years.
They grow up so fast.
How big is Superteam Germany? How many people do you have like routinely doing the in-person stuff? Because you guys do the was it every Friday? You do the in-person co-working, and then all sorts of online stuff too. Like how big is Superteam Germany?
Well, it's interesting because when we think about super teams, it's like a nougat, right? Like there's a little kernel of the people that are really regularly involved. There's the community of super team members, which is actually capped at 150 members. There can never really be more than 150. It's this Dunbar's number, right? So it's all about how many people can be in a community and still have it be personal. And if you have a community of maybe like 1,000 or plus people, it becomes very anonymous and you lose those connections with a lot of other people. And so to make sure everything stays, tight knit and sort of cozy and meaningful, because we want membership to actually mean something. So typically the number is 150. There are some super teams like India and some of the others that are, there's a lot of people. So sometimes it kind of fluctuates around there. At the moment, we have 130 members. We're quite conservative with who gets to be let in. And we also do regular purges as well. So if there's been people that have been onboarded a long time ago and they're not really active or not really interested anymore, we kind of let them move on and make space for new people.
Herd.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Remember, Nick can probably vouch for this. Remember? No, I'm someone with great aspirations who, when it comes down to it, is like, oh, I'm going to skip this one. And then I'm lost to the void. So it's probably good that you do the purges because people like me exist. Right.
Well, but it's also partially our job to make sure that we're giving value and there's a reason to continue getting engaged, right? Like, what's the point of showing up to a town hall if there's no value, right? So it's also part of our work to make sure that, there is reason and there's meaningful connections and that people actually have interest in contributing and giving and being part of it and growing something. To answer your first question, there's sort of this, 130 members all throughout Germany and actually in different countries too, because we were one of the very first super teams and the first in Europe. We kind of took in a bunch of the orphans. So everyone knows and loves Burger Bob, for example. He's actually in Denmark. Yeah. Leo from Metaplex.
What a character.
I love that man. So I found him at a bus stop in Berlin during Hacker House Berlin. He's a legend. Leo from Metaplex is in Italy. Almarildo from a bunch of different things is over in Portugal. So we have some orphans and people in like Austria, like Sol Andy. So we're very kind of all encompassing. And then we have obviously the people that contribute to our community or maybe come to events. A lot of our in-person events, if they're a bit bigger, they can be anywhere from, 80 to 200, 300. We've done some pretty big events in the past, depending on how we kind of market it or the focus. And so there's a bunch of people that are in our surrounding community or orbit, but that aren't part of our sort of little kernel of the center.
Don't have the official access pass, but they're still just like there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, there's a lot of people that we partner with or that enjoy coming to our events, but maybe aren't contributing meaningfully or any kind of like real way. So we're friends with everybody. We're everybody's welcome and we love partnering and hanging out with everybody, but there's only a select few that get that special treatment.
Makes sense.
I have like two general questions. They're kind of related, which is like, I guess, what is the actual stated mission, right, of Superteam or Superteam Germany? I don't know if they're the same, and that sort of leads to my other question, which is like, how similar are the various super teams, right? Like how independently do they operate? How different from each other can they be while still being Superteam?
Hey there, it's Nick. Quick intermission on the episode. If you're enjoying this episode, drop us a review in whatever podcast app you're already listening to, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. It would really, really help us out. We're trying to grow the show, trying to spread the good word of Solana and all the cool things and builders that are here in the ecosystem. And speaking of YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, we publish all of our episodes there. Don't forget to subscribe. It really helps us out too. And let's go ahead and get back to the episode.
So we have this mission to be the talent layer of Solana. Like really, wherever there is a country that has a super team, our mission is to enable them to be their best selves in a way, right? Whether that's earning, learning, creating content, whatever it is that will help them achieve what it is they want to achieve, from becoming better developers or creating their own startups or become really meaningful contributors to our larger Solana ecosystem. We're here to sort of grow the ecosystem pie, right? And that means bringing in new talent on sort of like a top of funnel, letting people know that, Solana is very welcoming and supportive and supporting through the whole hackathon season, letting developers and teams know that we're here to help them in whatever way we can, whether that's with their pitch decks or with just some moral support or teaching them how to make the most of their time management or helping brainstorm their product or whatever it is, helping them find teams as well. And this connectivity is really some of like that secret sauce that Superteam has, and that the people within our whole network and ecosystem is really such an incredibly valuable resource. And because we have an international network and because a lot of us have been deeply involved with Solana for a very long time, there's very little degree of separation. So if there's somebody new or a project or developer that wants to get in touch with a different project like Solana Beach or Phantom or Jito or whoever, right? Like, or Nick or someone at Foundation, there's always ways that we can help support them in making those connections or learning what they need to learn or getting the resources that they need. So it's really about enabling and bringing in the best talent that we possibly can into our little ecosystem. And to your second question, so every region has its own flavor. There are some regions like the UAE is a lot more focused on supporting founders. Nigeria has an incredible content community. There's the UK was born out of this incredible like high quality video content. They have a bunch of background there, so their content is like off the charts good. We all kind of have our own flavors and our own strengths, which when it kind of comes together, because we talk a lot and we collaborate a lot, and when we see what everyone else is doing, it really kind of raises the bar for everybody, right? Germany is more focused on builders. We've had a really strong technical community here, a lot of quite strong hackathon teams, for example. And so we have our own strengths, but we also kind of try to support each other with also different ideas or global initiatives. For example, Germany was the very first super team to do a build station. And Nigeria was the first super team to think of this idea of guilds, right? Where there's different segments of the community where the developers guild gets together once a week and they work on technical problems or support. And then the creators guild talks about, creator topics.
That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually really cool. And so a bunch of the other super teams have sort of taken on these ideas, right? And so there's a lot of similarities in what we do and how we do it, but there's definitely a very unique regional focus, also depending on who is in the country leading it as well.
Okay. I didn't realize each country, each region had like sort of like a semi niche focus. Like I didn't realize it was that. I thought it was more equal, like kind of equal skill sets, pretty much scattered around the world, not like a specific like niche within each. Do you all within the global, if there's like some sort of global event that like Superteam broadly is trying to push forward or like do each of the members of the different super team regions sort of help a different region on some particular thing, or do they stay pretty, I don't want to say isolated, but like pretty focused on whatever their specific region is working on?
I think it really depends on what it is. I mean, we do like on a kind of a surface level, it looks very similar because we all have sort of the same KPIs, and our communities are very similar. We do very similar events. And so I would say that there's more similarities than differences, but we all have kind of different strengths. If there is something that is more like the Founders Villa is maybe a good example of this, right? That they are really narrowed in on supporting founders, but those founders come from all over the world, right? There's a whole bunch of founders from all of our different regions. And so we are supporting them by, helping promote the Founders Villa and sending our incredible teams there, sharing their content and making sure that everybody knows that it's a really incredible place to be. Whereas, if we have a similar initiative or something like that, we kind of get support from all the other super teams. And there's a very collaborative atmosphere to it, especially around the hackathon, because that's sort of one of our big yearly pushes or bi-yearly pushes, where we're all kind of working towards a similar goal together, even if there's a little bit of competitiveness, because we all want to bring the best teams and kind of show off the talent within our country, right?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds like, there's tons of autonomy, but there is like some kind of governance system across all the various super teams. Yeah.
In a way, yeah. So there is a little bit of a structure behind Superteam Global, and there's a bunch of things that we use in the back end that are similar, like our Airtables or our stats, grants. And so there's a bunch of things that are very similar and that we all kind of use as well. And we have similar KPIs, and we kind of are all moving in the same direction. And there's obviously a few people that are behind the scenes at Superteam Global, or Superteam Earn, for example, plays a big role in that. And there's a few people that kind of help keep the coordination and the organization behind the scenes, for sure.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for illuminating. I feel like Superteam is one of those organizations that
it's an enigma in a way.
You hear about all the time in Solana, right? It's huge in terms of its sort of mind share and impact on the ecosystem. But I've never really stopped and asked questions about the organization of it, how it works, who's running it, that sort of thing. So that's kind of cool. I guess I kind of want to ask some more personal questions about your Solana ecosystem, and you sort of alluded to it in the conversation that you're an artist and creator. So can we rewind the clock a little bit to even pre NFTs, pre blockchain, and what was your focus when you found crypto, and what was that learning experience / what got you hooked type of thing?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I've always been a creative / rebel. Like I mentioned, I'm from a small town in Canada. But at a very young age, I started dressing very unusually, and shaving my hair off. And, I've always been a little bit, I'm definitely the black sheep of the family. I went to art school. I was the art kid, and I'm the only person in my family that's ever left the home city. And so I've always had this artistic edge, and I did painting and drawing classes ever since I was really, really young. And so it was one of my possibly stronger skill sets, I suppose you could say. And I studied it throughout university, and then I started veering towards more philosophy and anthropology. My master's was all about sort of contemplative art practices within different religious traditions. And then I kind of, how one thing kind of leads into the next. That's always been how my life has unfolded. And I was in Germany and I really enjoyed it here. And I was like, gosh, I'd really like to stay and continue living here. And I'm like, well, I can either get a normal job and get a German visa, like a work visa, or I can continue studying and be my like continued free floating self. And so I have this like really deep love and a drive to learn. And so I continued with my PhD. And my focus was on anthropology and Buddhism and art. And so art has always been kind of a propelling and supportive feature in my life. And to get myself through university, I also worked as a tattoo artist for a good 13 years or so. You'd never know, but I'm fully covered. And so when I had finished my PhD and I was like pretty burnt out on academia, it took me, like over 10 or 12 something years to get through the entire process and the bureaucratic stuff. And I just really needed a break. And it was COVID as well. And so I got really into just going back to my roots and getting back to my art and kind of taking care of myself. I started streaming on Twitch full time. So I was streaming my art process, which was really interesting and kind of got me a little bit more. Yeah, it was actually a lot of fun. It got me more into the internet culture. I fell in love with memes. Because prior to that, I was very like anti-technology. I was like, Facebook's just stealing my data. I don't want my smartphone to track me. And so I didn't even have a smartphone. And I didn't have internet at home. Like I was very, like I say, I've been a rebel kind of, and kind of a quirky person, which crypto is perfect for me. Like I feel like I found my home.
It's funny you were describing being a rebel, and it didn't like click for me until you said you didn't have internet, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Okay, that degree of like not just like a rebel against your parents or family or community, but like kind of like I don't want to do anything that the rest of the world is doing.
Yeah, kind of this like burn it down. I'm not going to participate. You know, they're stealing my attention and my data and all of this kind of stuff, which is interesting because in a different weird way, it aligns with a lot of Web3 values of ownership and decentralization and all of this kind of stuff. So it really spoke to my heart, which is why when I found Web3 in mid 2021, I was asked to be part of an NFT project as their lead artist. And I started, no one else in the team was doing anything. They were all slacking off and who knows what. And I'm like, okay, well, I was always kind of the kid in the group that did all the work of the class project, right? So I started doing some research. And I'm like, okay, well, if we want this thing to be successful, what do we need to know? Who are the key opinion leaders? Or I didn't even know what a KOL was at that point. Thank goodness. The days of being naive. And then I was like, okay, well, what do we need to know about this ecosystem, and what do we need to know to make it successful? And so I kind of just started ambling down the rabbit hole, and I figured out that digital asset ownership was mind-blowing and revolutionary, and that had never happened before. And it opened up so many doors for creators to actually not just own their artworks, but the relationships to creators was completely changed. And royalties blew my mind. Like there were so many things that this technology enabled that I had never considered before. And so I fell in love and I went full time, 2021, and that's been the love story ever since. So, and here we are.
Awesome. That's
amazing. What was the NFT project? I'm curious. What was the art theme? Like, what was it? Did it end up ever happening, or did you kind of just like leave it alone and go on?
I got rugged so hard.
Classic.
Yeah, it was not great. So a lot of my art revolves around death and impermanence and sort of Buddhist themes. And so I draw a lot of skulls and sort of dark themes. And so the project really was kind of fitting. And so it was, they had bought a saber-toothed tiger skull. And so all of the images were around the saber-toothed tiger skull. And they actually, it seemed like if they were interested in making it work, it could have worked, because they had some really cool partnerships with the Museum of Minnesota, where they're living. This is actually my husband's cousin that roped me into this.
Oh no,
and rugged me.
Family.
Oh snap! Plot thickens.
Oh snap! The plot thickens. Yeah, and so I did all this art for them, and then they accused me of plagiarism, of like a project that looked entirely different after I spent hours and hours making all this damn art. And then they wanted to. Yeah, it was an absolute mess. And so TLDR, they never launched, and they suck. Yeah, but we're still on cordial terms. You know, I have to see them when I go see my in-laws. So I I've let it go.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's not fun.
But
like,
hey, it's in my where I am. You know?
I assumed you could just not see these people, but the fact that you still have to like interact with them, that sucks. That sucks so bad.
Yeah, and but you know, I often try to see, you know, a lot of things have a double-edged sword, right? And it's like, you know what, if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't have gotten into Web3, and I wouldn't be where I am now, right? And I'm really grateful that, you know, sometimes you have to go through the fire, and we've all done like so much trauma bonding together that my rug is definitely not the worst of what has happened in our ecosystem. So it's really not that bad, but it's helped me find my home.
Well, yeah, it definitely sounds like you've channeled it for something positive. And obviously that's like a great mindset to say like, yes, it was something unfortunate, but I'm here in this ecosystem now as a result of what happened. We sort of glossed over a little bit, like between the, like, I'm here now, and that, you know, you said 2 years ago in November, starting Superteam Germany. So I imagine, you know, being one of the founders of Superteam Germany, it's like very, it's running a community can be administrative, and like there's a lot to it that isn't necessarily being an artist. And so I am curious, like, going from full-time streaming art, you know, your process as an artist in 2020 to you've now founded this, you know, phenomenal community in 2022. What has that change been like? Right? Like, I imagine I imagine you still do a lot of artwork, but it's probably not your all day thing, right? Like, what?
So it's interesting. There was definitely like a bit of like transitionatory time, because so I was streaming full time, and then I got a lot deeper into Web3, and the world of Twitch and streaming is very anti-crypto, so I kind of had to make my choice. So unfortunately, I transitioned away from streaming, but we had already started this in-person community like late 2021, early 2022, that was really focused around creators, right? NFT Club. We did exhibitions in person and in the metaverse, and we did all sorts of different events showing off artwork at big sort of like club places, and we did more kind of established gallery showings. We did an insane amount of just all different kinds of events and exhibitions and creator activations and onboarding and all this kind of stuff. And so it was sort of a shift from this creator side, really focusing on my art, and then sort of bringing that in person and sort of creating a lot more in-person communities, which is interesting because that's also what I studied in a lot of ways in university, in that my PhD is in anthropology and contemporary anthropology. So it's how do people connect and interact and build communities? And so I went from a very theoretical background of creating communities and connections and what creates meaning, right? Why do people come together, and what do we communicate when we are together? And so I kind of got really deep into this meaning of Web3 culture and how we signal inclusivity and how we signal all of our kind of cultural niches within our bubble, right? The fact that a lot of us wear merch, or how we talk to each other, or the language that we use. Exactly. And so I spent a lot of like 2022 kind of getting really deep into that vertical, I guess. And so by the time Superteam kind of came around, we had already established a pretty decent community here, especially with the summer camp and some of our other events. And so between NFT Club Berlin and some of the relationships and events that we did with Foundation, there was already a pretty well-established foundation, right? That kind of then got a little bit rebranded and transformed into the very beginnings of Superteam, which then, went more countrywide. But Berlin still is very much the center of our whole organization here.
Nice.
You've shifted into the applied anthropology now.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's really great to bring things into the real world and actually be able to contribute and make differences, like tangible differences in people's lives. And that was, maybe it's also interesting that one of the reasons that I did hustle as hard as I did throughout 2022 with no financial support in Web3, just doing whatever I could, because it was so rewarding to me. People would constantly tell me like, hey, it was because of your event that I met my co-founder, or I met my new group of friends that I didn't even know were into Web3 and have supported me. Like the amount of collaboration and people's lives that have been changed because of some of the events and some of the things that I did previously, that was so inspiring. And it just, it ignites that fire. You just want to continue doing it and helping people, find that path for themselves.
That's awesome.
Especially when it's like from an in-person event, like with all of us spending so much time online in this digital world that is blockchain anything. When you do like in-person events, you get like that lasting effect on someone that just that just comes up in conversation later. Like I had a call maybe last week, the week before, someone I had met a year prior at the boot camp that we did in the New York City office right before the New York City Hacker House. And they were like, hey, this was my first time like looking at anything blockchain. And now that's the creator of Gibwork. And he's been doing that basically since. He's been like, that's how he got his foray into Solana. And he's like still here. Same with Andre, who's at Turbine. And like so many of these in-person relationships that are like sort of like start growing from this in-person event. And it's the way to grow the community, obviously. And that's kind of what Superteam's all about, it seems like. Yeah. Do these support these in-person events, different locales around the world, and foster the community. It's great.
100%. And I think that's one of the secret sauces that Solana has had from early on. I mean, the events team at Foundation is...
the events ninjas, second to none.
Second to none. So unbelievable. And especially if you look at the timeline of like, okay, there was COVID and there was this real need to reconnect in person. And especially crypto is this very like anonymous, it's hard to trust people. And Solana took an entirely different approach with the hacker houses really early on and really doubling down on supporting developers in person. I think it's completely transformed our entire ecosystem and has so much to do with what a strong community we have, because there's so many people that we see each other all around the world at the different hacker houses and breakpoints and island DAOs and all the different places. And those relationships and those connections forge such meaningful bonds that I think we really don't appreciate the power that these in-person events and how it's really shaped our culture, and actually in a large part, or I mean, the success of Solana in general as well.
For sure.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree.
I want to, I think a lot of our listeners are developers, but because of that, I think we're often interested in exposing some of what it's like to not be a developer in the Solana ecosystem, right? So whether that's people in more like marketing BD roles or artistic roles, community type roles, event type roles. There's so much that goes into it that I think developers on Solana notice and appreciate, right? Because we all have been in other ecosystems that aren't like Solana, where we don't get this type of support, and it's like, oh, the difference is sort of investment in other stuff, right? That supports us. So I'm curious if you have anything to share about, coming in with not the typical developer background into the Solana ecosystem and what that's like.
It was interesting because back, late 2021, early 2022, it was still very developer focused, which rightfully so, because if you have a blockchain and not that much is built on it, then how are you actually going to, engage with it and interact with it and make it something that is really impactful? I think it's interesting, because you can see the different layers of our blockchain ecosystem, right? Obviously, there's a lot of fundamentals that need to be really well taken care of. And even just building on Solana has really drastically changed in the last few years. Like, it's so much easier to onboard devs and get them really engaged and excited. And we've also seen this shift from the earlier hackathons as well, that it was much more technically focused. And in the last, especially, I'd say 2 hackathons, not including this one, the shift to seeing it as more of a startup competition. And also that being reflected in the prize money too, right? Previously, there was a lot more prize money, and now it's a little bit more focused on the longevity of the projects in terms of like accelerator funding. And I think this shift is really interesting in terms of allowing a lot more diversity of skills into our ecosystem, and really recognizing that it takes a whole kind of village. It takes a whole different breadth of skill sets to create a lot of like impactful change and impactful projects, right? A lot of developers, they don't want to be founders, and maybe don't necessarily make the best founders always. There's a lot of
crazy.
No shade, but there's different skill sets. Some people are better than some things than others. It's great to have a salesperson on your team. The people that love to talk and can sell your stuff, because a lot of it is also about getting your idea out there. You can have an incredible product that is just beautifully built and really seamless, but if nobody knows about it, you're going to be screwed. So there's been a lot more emphasis in the last, few hackathons where it's like, you know what, we need more people that are interested in being founders, or more business minded, or product minded, or creative. They have the design aspect. They have the ability to kind of make something really aesthetically pleasing that helps kind of promote it and make it more interesting to investors or users or whatever, right? And so I think this refinement is a really interesting new step that we've seen, and kind of maturity with our ecosystem. Whereas previously, everything was kind of like, if things
it was janky.
Together,
it was janky. You can say it. It was very janky. The UX was terrible. The developer experience was terrible. And over the last year alone, let alone last 2, maybe 3 years, like every single couple of months, there's like, maybe I'll say every year, there's like a step change, a step rise in the quality and the experience from across the board in every single sort of interaction, whether it's developer building something, a user using something, stability of the chain. There's a step improvement every year or so, and it's been awesome.
100%. And I think this is part where the non-technical people are a little bit slow to come in, but we can definitely see it. And that the talent is slowly starting to build up, in the sense where it's like, oh, these people are actually really, really valuable. And there's obviously a large creator economy. It's not as robust as it potentially could be. But I think there's a lot of areas where, Web3 also meets Web2, or we kind of meet the more external, like top of funnel, public. And a lot of that is in non-technical sort of spaces. I feel like there's a lot we can still do in terms of letting people know what our ecosystem is capable of, and getting creators or having this sort of mass appeal through something like the artist channel, or people that they have a very different social network or structure, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of the values, our kind of rebellious nature and I think a lot of people have dismissed Web3 and crypto because there is a lot of financial aspect to it. But the more the tech gets built out where it can actually really support creators of all kinds, the content creators, musicians, artists, whatever. And you can see that there is a lot more interest in supporting that aspect too, especially on the content side, which has a very, very long way to go. But the more people that are creating really engaging and interesting content, that can really, really change perspectives and bring in a whole different swath of people, right? It can also support the developers too, because the more content and valuable, writing or whatever it is, everybody wins, because it brings more people into our ecosystem with all different kinds of skill sets.
Valid.
Yeah, so true. So true.
I think a lot of developers fall into the mindset of, if you build it, they will come type of thing. I have been guilty of this myself, right? So I'm not throwing shade at the audience here. It's just like, it's natural as someone who's building a thing that you think users will use to think like, because I'm creating something useful, it will be useful. But really, that's just
it has to be found first before it can be useful.
It's got to be found. Also, what a developer thinks is useful is not necessarily the same thing as what an end user thinks will be useful.
Unless you're building developer tooling, and that's it. That's the only caveat to that.
Yeah, no, and even then, it's like your perspective on what developer tooling should be might not actually be that indicative. Like having there is a skill to being very like product minded and being able to source feedback across like a variety of different sort of types of user and consolidating that into what should this experience really be. So I love that shift that you're describing. And then B, I do just want to call out like my personal transformation over the last decade is from someone who's like, well, I'm the important one because I'm building a thing, to like, actually, maybe that's one of the less important things, right? Like, because there is something to be said for people just willing things into existence through describing their vision, and then other people build it, where it's like, oh, actually the vision was the most important thing. The person writing about it or speaking about it, or, that kind of thing. So it is, I don't know, it is just interesting to how that has shifted for me personally over time. And it's cool to see the ecosystem have like a similar type of progression, I guess.
Yeah, because it's like, if you can't communicate what it is, what the incredible thing is that you've built or your vision, how is anyone going to understand it? And I think there's something really special about Web3 in the sense that we have it's very interdisciplinary, right? We have people from finance, we have all different kinds of developers, we have people with all different kinds of backgrounds, marketing and designers and artists, and it's like this bizarre melding pot of people that have typically very shared values and interests of the direction that we're going, in a decentralized, future that can potentially really shift and change a lot of things that are very, very broken about our world. And this collaborative aspect, because we are kind of the rebels, and we are kind of forging a new path because we see this shared vision and we're like, we want to go there. Let's do it together. And having this sort of closer collaboration between teams, I'm like, you know what? Actually, your skill set of communication, or your skill set of being able to sell the thing that we need to sell, or your ability to do market research or get user feedback, like those kinds of things are so important, and they really support each other. And so I think it's really nice to see a lot of really strong teams, and they have really, really diverse skill sets, but working together in really kind of inspiring and instrumental ways to create things that have never been done before. Because I mean, that's the whole reason we're here, right? We have no idea what it is that's going to be developed in the next few years. And if we can help foster people to be as creative as possible and really collaborate between the technical people and the non-technical people and all different skill sets, then everybody wins. And at the end of the day, our ecosystem will be that much more robust too.
How do we foster that sort of increase in creativity that you're talking about?
I think there's a few different ways. In-person engagement, I think, is also really valuable, because then you actually can give people a little bit more, not necessarily the benefit of the doubt, but you can communicate a little bit more clearly about what it is that you're working on, and really kind of hash out what's the vision? What are we trying to do? And I think that's also why there's been this focus on hackathons since the beginning of time. And you can tell I've just come through the hackathon season, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's been a lot. But there's so much value in it, right? Because these teams come together, and we're really trying to bring in a different wave of skilled people, right? Bring in more founder potential people, business-minded people, product people, and pairing them together. And so I think once people see the value of having a great communicator or a great salesperson or product person, it also happens a little bit naturally that once a team starts forming, they're like, man, we need somebody that helps support us with this aspect of our entire project. And so I think this shift in how the hackathons are kind of explained and how people see them as more startup competitions, even just that, it opens up so much more room for non-technical people to get involved and bring in a lot more creative people and sort of just, yeah, be inspired by especially some of the leaders in our community. Even I was totally, he was like, the main message he said at Breakpoint was like, go build weird shit, right? Like, go innovate, go try something new. And yeah, the more kind of collaborative creativity we have, the better we'll be able to do that, I think, too.
Nice.
Well said.
I have one last thing that I want to ask, and then I'll see if Nick has anything. After, you were initially rugged in your first NFT project, were there any other NFT projects after that? / if not, are there any in your future? Will we ever see an NFT project from you?
Well, gosh. So I got much more into the one-of-one art space. And so that was sort of my home for quite a while. And there's obviously a wide spectrum of what we can call NFT projects, right? Whether that
counts.
That's like, like a custom one-of-one collection versus like a 10K, who knows what, right? I feel like NFTs, there's still some development, or like there's still something there that's undiscovered, right? I think what NFTs can be, I don't think has been fully explored. It's definitely gone through some kind of cycle, similar with meme coins or like whatever. We go through these cycles. And I'm not saying that NFTs will necessarily come back, but I think it might develop in a different way. And seeing some of the creative applications, even like what Radiance does, for example, or some of the ways that people are using it as sort of like community creation, engagement things, can be really interesting. I don't know what our futures have in store. I don't know if I will be involved at some point in the future with something similar to that. At the moment, it's like the crypto time moves so quickly. Like, we have no idea. 3 months in crypto is like 2 years in the normal world. So if I even just projecting like where I'm going to be, I have no idea. So I'm just letting the wave, the Solana wave, carry me where I'm going to end up.
Well, NFTs or otherwise, how do I see your artwork? Or where can I?
Oh gosh. A lot of it is up on Exchange.
Okay.
That's probably the best collection of it, but it's mostly one of one stuff. A lot of it, I'm a physical traditional artist, so I did a lot of like painting, drawing with ink and watercolors and this kind of thing. And also I was active on Drip, but Superteam is a very full-time job. Like it is like beyond. I can
imagine. Yeah,
it's beyond. And so my own artistic expressions have definitely taken a backseat, but in the same way, I feel like I get to express my creativity and I get to create something with community that's obviously different than traditional or fine art, but being able to grow something and create something that's larger than myself is very exciting and very inspiring. And I know in the future, I'm sure at some point I'll semi-retire and have more time for my art. So there is a little bit on chain, but at the moment, that side of my life is pretty quiet.
That is totally fine. I'm just curious to see some of what's out there, you know. And I would agree. I think there's an artistic element to anything that you do with intentionality and purpose, right? Like I feel I'm not an artist, but there's software that I've made where it's like that feels like an artistic process, right? Even if it's not visual, even if it's entirely sort of business logic type of stuff, there is some element of it that feels like artistic expression. So I definitely think you can count what you're doing with community and Superteam as being something artistic.
Yeah. I often feel like artists and devs have a lot more in common than they would think. I mean, I've only done like very basic coding basics, but there's so much creativity and so much problem solving involved, and you really are building something from the ground up.
Code's an art form.
It 100% is. I am completely convinced.
I appreciate that, and I also feel like the way I've heard some artists, especially like some sculptors, describe what it's like to sort of chisel away at something to get to what's underneath, feels a lot like what.
That's exactly how it feels like to me when I write code.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And like artists, we often have this vision in our head of what it needs to look like, but then getting the technical skills and making it actually look like that is a whole nother thing. And it's like, if you have an idea of something that you want to build, but then you're just constrained by actually building it, right? It's very similar, like creative, like vision process, and then trying to implement it in a way where it comes into reality, right?
Yeah. Well, Nick, any last things from you before we?
I think that's the most beautiful way to end the episode. Code is art. Community is art.
Community is art.
Build cool shit. Build weird shit. Let's go.
Let's go. LFG.
Are there any sort of last minute things that you want to say to our audience, Bekka?
No, that's it. You know, continue to enjoy this crazy journey. Like, we don't know where we're going, but have fun with it and try new things and collaborate with quirky people. It's like we're all a little bit, you know, a little different, and you never know. You never know what's going to happen and what will come out of those collaborations. At the very least, we'll learn something, and yeah, who knows? Let's just fuck around and find out.
Let's fucking go. I love that as a party message. Thank you so much for joining us, Bekka.
Thank you, Bekka.
Conversation. We'll have to do it again sometime if you're open to it. But to the listeners, we'll see you all next time.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Solfate podcast. I hope you liked it. I know we did. We always have a blast recording with our amazing guests. If you've got a moment, please leave us a review in your podcast app or subscribe on YouTube. And I guess it's time to get some more coffee and get back to work.